Timor-Leste President Jose Ramos-Horta, who is in Sydney at the moment. Good morning, Your Excellency. We just saw this very sad and heartbreaking report about the conflict in the Middle East and the collateral damage. Given East Timor's own history of conflict and struggle for independence, what are your views on this tragedy that's unfolding?
It is an abominable catastrophe what is happening in Gaza and Lebanon, a country like Israel that born from the ashes of the Holocaust, that inspire and mobilize sympathy through history, should be the first to understand the plight, the rights of the Palestinian people for freedom, for a state of their own. As much as it is not acceptable what Hamas did on October 7 last year, as much as it is not acceptable what has been Hamas' attitudes, policies for many, many years. It's not only last year. Hamas was always opted for violence against other Palestinians, against the Palestine Liberation Organization, against the Palestinian Authority. As much as we understand all of this, Israel should not descend to the level of Hamas. Israel should not descend to the moral gutter. And they have done just that. They brought themselves down to the moral gutter and now isolated all over the world. Even Israel's friends, whether Australia, the European, the US, they find it increasingly very difficult to continue to support Israel. And it is abominable for the West that lecture everybody else that took a principled stance against the Russian invasion of Ukraine, imposed sanctions on Ukraine, but then when it comes to Gaza, to Palestine, the West find all kinds of excuses not to impose sanctions, particularly the banning of weapons to Israel.
Do you think the role of international organisations like the UN to help resolve conflicts has diminished compared to, say, 25 years ago in your country?
Very difficult for the United Nations. As you know, Israel even now declared Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, persona non grata. Antonio Guterres is one of the most decent human beings on earth. A deeply religious person, deeply compassionate person, with his integrity is beyond question by anyone. For any country to ban Antonio Guterres, consider him persona non grata, it shows the level of arrogance, of insensitivity of that particular country. You cannot find a better human being, a smartest person than Antonio Guterres to lead an organization like the UN in these difficult times. Of course, as we know, the problem of the UN is the problem of the 5 permanent members. When the superpowers, Russia, China, and the United States, and the other major powers like France, UK, China, and they are not able to work together within the Council to prevent conflicts or to resolve the conflicts when they occur, well, no one else can do it.
So your own diplomatic stance, how does that align with the partnerships that you have with the big countries like China, like the US, like Australia?
Well, China is actually the only member of the Security Council, the only P5, that's not involved, at least directly, in the war in Ukraine. They are not involved in supplying weapons to any side in Gaza conflict, in Palestine-Israel conflict. And in fact, it was China that mediated rapprochement, normalization relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. It was China that mediated better relations between Hamas and the PLO in Palestine. But other than that, the Security Council is very polarized, very fractured. But increasingly, you see France and the UK distancing themselves from the position taken by the US, beginning to confront Israel with the absolute necessity of ending the war in Gaza and stopping from continuing the aggression in Lebanon. But at the same time, we have to be serious. We have to also put pressure on Hezbollah to stop firing rockets into Israel. Hamas should do the same. Israel is entitled to safety, to security as well. So all sides, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Israel, must stop this carnage that is killing tens of thousands of innocent people, children, women, and leaving deep scars forever in their soul, in the minds of those people in Gaza and West Bank. Israel is creating,
for sure. This is why I'm sorry to interrupt, Your Excellency,
hatred.
But I want to bring the topic back to peace in the region, the Asia Pacific. We know that you visited China 3 months ago, that they're investing in East Timor infrastructure like the national grid, helping you to get into ASEAN. You know, how do you balance your relationship with China with your alliance with other countries?
We have an excellent relationship with Australia, New Zealand, excellent relationship with Indonesia and the rest of ASEAN countries. We are joining ASEAN next year, 2025. We have an excellent relationship with Republic of Korea, South Korea, with Japan, with China, and with the United States, and with the European Union. We have no problems whatsoever with any country in the world, and we pray that the United States and China reset their relationship for the benefit of the two countries and for the benefit of the region. We obviously have a more active relationship with Australia and the United States than with China. We have Australian military police personnel on the ground in Timor-Leste for the last 22 years. We have American military personnel on the ground in Timor-Leste. And we have also Portuguese military police personnel training our people on the ground in Timor-Leste. So we have a much more security cooperation with Australia, with Portugal, with the United States than we have with China. With China, we have zero security cooperation. We do have a very active economic trade relations, and we are looking forward to expanding the economic and trade relations with China.
You're a staunch defender of human rights. Do you ever point out China's human rights issues?
Well, you know, for years, Europe, Australia, United States, talk about the problems of the Uyghur in China. And yet, when it comes to Gaza, to Palestine, the horrendous suffering inflicted on the children and women in Gaza, now in Lebanon, I don't hear the same strident condemnation of what's happening there as we heard over alleged, and I can say alleged, violence perpetrated by China against the Uyghur population. There has never been any visual material that was put out about the alleged crimes committed by China with the Uyghur people. But there is abundant, we see it every day happening right now.
Like Chinese democracy, must both be called out. Would you agree?
Well,
Western democracy and Chinese democracy.
Well, we are the best democracy in Asia. My country is rated one of the freest in the world in terms of media freedom, better than Australia, better than the United States, UK, France, Germany, better than Japan, South Korea in terms of media freedom. So we stand very proudly, very freely to talk about these issues. But I say we respect the different political systems in different countries, whether Singapore, whether Brunei, or Thailand, or whether China or Australia. We are not going to lecture other countries that might not have the same practices as us in terms of our vision in practice on democracy. There are many ways to serve a society.
Finally, I want to ask about energy transition, given that climate change can affect island nations so much more, and that Timor-Leste is diesel-reliant and your primary gas and oil fields are being depleted. What's the strategy?
Well, we are going to continue to make use of fossil fuel, in this regard gas, to power our economy, and by using fossil fuel, gas, for the foreseeable future, it helps us, enable us to transition to renewable. We cannot jump into a cliff now by rhetorically, irresponsibly say we are abandoning fossil fuel. That would be totally irrational, suicidal. We do what many other countries that are oil and gas producing countries do. We try to transition to renewable. We are already doing that. But at the same time, as long as we have not reached the level of other developed countries, we still need our own non-renewable resources to feed our people, to build infrastructures, schools, hospitals, to plant trees by the millions to reforest our country, using the revenues that come from non-renewable.
And finally, congratulations on Timor-Leste's 25th anniversary of getting the vote for independence. What's next in your vision for your country?
Well, thank you. What I can say, 25 years after the referendum, 23 years after independence, we are at peace. We have zero political violence. We have absolute tranquility in the country, whereby our people, 99.6% Catholics, live peacefully, fraternally with Protestants and Muslims who live there. We have made tremendous progress in education area. For instance, 25 years ago, we had one PhD. Today, we have hundreds. 25 years ago, we had 19 medical doctors. Today, we have more than 1,000 medical doctors.
What about poverty?
Yes, poverty remains widespread, but even in that area we have made progress. Just to give you one number, one figure, to make people understand where we are. In 2002, life expectancy in Timor-Leste was less than 60 years. Now life expectancy is almost 70. So we have made improvements in the life expectancy of people. So we gained 12 years in 20 years since independence. But it has been a failure on our part in not having done much more in eliminating child malnutrition, child poverty, in not investing more in protecting women and children, particularly women in childbearing age, in supporting pregnant women, so that we can really have a healthy society. I hope the mistakes, the failures of the last 20 years are going to be corrected starting right now with the new government.
Thank you so much for your time today.